Bem-vindas e bem-vindos ao Apenas Fumaça, onde se fala sobre a sociedade com quem quer falar sobre ela. Eu sou o Ricardo Ribeiro. Hoje temos como convidada Falastine Dwikat, desde Ramallah, e por isso estamos a gravar por Skype e falaremos também em inglês. A Falastine é ativista palestiniana envolvida na campanha Ahed Tamimi, Libertem a Família Tamimi. Bem-vinda. Welcome to Apenas Fumaça, Falastine.
Thank you for having me, Ricardo.
Ben Henry Wright wrote in his piece, Ahed Tamimi has become the symbol of a new generation of Palestinian resistance, published in The Nation. Please don't make Ahed a hero. Heroes, when they are Palestinian, end up dead or behind bars. Let her be a kid. Fight to set her free, so that one day she can be an ordinary woman in an ordinary land. Can you describe who's Ahed Tamimi and what happened during the night of the 19th of December last year, less than 2 months ago?
Well, Ahed is an average Palestinian kid, really. A Palestinian child who happened to grow under occupation like all Palestinian children in a village that chose to resist against occupation and illegal settlements, and that was where she grew up, and by default, that shaped her personality. What happened on the night of the 19th when she was arrested is that earlier that day, her cousin Muhammad was shot in the head, and he was very critically injured and was operated on in a very critical surgery. He luckily survived, but they had to remove parts of his skull. When Ahed knew the news, she collapsed and she started crying. And that's why when the soldiers tried to storm their house, and what you see in the video that went very viral is Ahed trying to stop the soldiers from entering their house, where they wanted to strategically position themselves to shoot more Palestinian kids who were demonstrating in the village. And what happened that day is that her mother, Ahed Tamimi, documented what happened on video, which went super viral, and that caused a wave of incitement. That video hit the Israeli mainstream media and caused a big political and hate campaign against Ahed and Nariman and all of the Tamimi family, really, which basically resulted that night in the Israeli military forces to storm their night in the middle of the night and go and arrest Ahed, and then arrest her mother the following day after she went to check on her at the local police station.
Mm-hmm. So Nariman is Ahed's mother. The journalist Ben Henry Wright, in the same piece I was quoting a minute ago, said 2 Fridays ago, 1 week before Ahed chased the soldiers from her yard, it was her cousin Mohammed, one of her little brother's closest friends. A soldier shot him in the face. The bullet, rubber coated, but a bullet nonetheless, lodged in his skull. A week later, he was still in medically induced coma. If you've seen the video that led to her arrest, you might have wondered why Ahed was so angry at the soldiers who entered her yard, why she yelled at them to leave, why she slapped them. That's why. That and 1,000 other reasons. Her uncle and her cousin killed, her mother shot in the leg and on crutches for most of a year, her parents and her brother taken from her for months at a time, and never a night's rest without the possibility that she might wake, as she did early Tuesday morning, as she did so many times before, to soldiers at the door, in her house, in her room, there to take someone away. Is this violence and oppression normal for Palestinians?
It is actually, and unfortunately, for most people who live, especially in villages that are near the illegal Israeli settlements, this kind of violence is very usual, especially in villages that choose to peacefully protest against those settlements that are built on their land. It's sad to say, but this is the case of most of the Palestinian villages around here. People grow up in terror, and that's because the Israeli apartheid system is built deliberately to protect settlers who live in illegal settlements. And that means that Palestinians who live in nearby villages and towns have to pay for that. Their homes are constantly stormed by Israeli military. If they choose to peacefully demonstrate against these settlements being built on their land, Their homes are stormed. Their relatives are shot. They're taken to jail. It's unfortunate to say, but the existence and the continuation of this occupation on Palestinian land is the result of this ongoing violence, which will not stop until Palestine is free.
And can you talk about what charges is Ahed facing right now?
Well, Ahed is facing 12 charges right now. But what's more important than the charges she's facing is the military court system that she's being persecuted under. Palestinians who are living in the West Bank are not treated as civilians in Israeli courts. They are treated under a military rule, which is a violation of international law and human rights law to begin with, because you cannot persecute civilians under a military law. And as a child, this is even double, triple, and this is double and triple violation of human rights and international law as well. And that's why not just Ahed, but so many other Palestinian children are put in dark prison cells and persecuted in Israeli military courts just for as much as protesting or voicing their opposition against the occupation, or demonstrating on the streets, or posting on Facebook. I had the charges that are directed against her are literally all about her demonstrating and taking the street and voicing her opinions against the occupation. And so is her mom. Her mom was literally arrested just because she documented that video of the soldiers trying to storm their house and shoot Palestinian children from their front yard. All of these things are considered illegal under the Israeli military law. And so many innocent people and non-violent activists are taken every day to prison because of these charges that have no ground and no legality and shouldn't be. It's just absolutely suppression of their freedom to express themselves, to take the street, to demonstrate peacefully for their cause and their people.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the charges that Ahed is also being prosecuted on is on stone throwing. And stone throwing in Israeli law can lead to 20 years in jail. Is it possible that she is imprisoned for several years?
Well, the legal case that we have now, and based on what the lawyer said, sadly, she can possibly go to jail up to 9 years unless the world really intervenes and puts pressure on the Israeli military court to let her go. Because she was charged with a total of 12 charges, including incitement, including yelling at a soldier, and allegedly including throwing stones as well.
Mm-hmm. So the Israeli court also ruled very recently, actually, to keep Ahed Tamimi jailed until the end of the trial. What is your comment on that?
Well, this is a legal precedent, really. They never gave an open check, especially for a child to be in prison until the end of the legal proceeding. And this is only a proof that Ahed is in prison because of a political hate campaign that the Israeli media and the Israeli politicians are launching against Ahed. There are no legal grounds, really, for keeping her in prison until the end of the legal proceeding. And if anything, this proves that the only goal of this is to lock Ahed down and keep her in prison, just to make an example of her to other Palestinian children or even adults, that if you choose to resist the occupation, if you are as much as to raise your voice to call for the freedom of your people, this is where you will end up being.
I think, it's important to note also that Ahed Tamimi is now 17 years old, but she was arrested when she was 16. According to Defense for Children International, since 2000, at least 8,000 Palestinian children have been arrested and prosecuted in the Israeli military detention system. And around 500 to 700 Palestinian children are arrested, detained, and prosecuted each year. The majority of Palestinian child detainees are charged with throwing stones, and 3 out of 4 experienced physical violence during arrest, transfer, and interrogation. Can you talk about this, the fact that children in Palestine are being prosecuted by the hundreds or thousands every year, sorry?
Well, this is like, there is so much to say about that, of course. But if you look at the systematic approach of the Israeli military system, it is the whole military system and the whole military court and military rule system is built in order to crush Palestinians. And they don't even want Palestinians to grow up before they crush them. The reason why Palestinians are taken to jail, even when they're prisoners, even when they're sometimes 7 years old, sometimes they're 12, there is no age cap for when Palestinian children are being arrested and subject to incarceration and torture, even in prison. And the main reason for that is that this current Israeli apartheid system and occupation system aims to crush Palestinians and crush their spirit. So even when they're children, so they can never think of raising their voice against occupation, taking the streets to demonstrate, or even as much as write articles or be involved in politics when they grow up. And it's not going to stop, unfortunately, because despite the high rates of children incarceration, and by the way, Israel is the only country in the world that have a juvenile military court that is only for Palestinians. It's the only country that runs around the world with such impunity. And it is because the international community failed to hold it accountable for that. And if no one really intervenes, and if the international community keeps its complicity, then more Palestinian children will be incarcerated and will be taken to prison and will be crushed into dark prison cells and will be subject to torture and emotional abuse.
And what do you think should be what do you think should be the international response to this?
There have been many responses, especially on the case of Ahed, singling it out as the one case. But in the truth of the matter is, this is the case of thousands of Palestinian children. The only difference is that they don't happen to be as known activists as Ahed. And what needs to happen is that so many things, but the one most important thing is that the military rule and these military courts are illegal. And the world should come together. All the people who work in politics and who work in laws know exactly what we're talking about when we say these military courts are illegal. So one of the things that needs to happen first is dismantle these laws because they are illegitimate and they should be dealt with as illegitimate occupation entities.
You've been to Nabi Saleh, the village where Ahed Tamimi lives, and the whole family really. And you've been there in a few protests recently and also in front of the Ofer prison. Can you talk about the Palestinian response and also the Israeli response during the clashes recently in Nabi Saleh and what you've seen in the protests?
Well, this protest has been really scary to say the least because people peacefully took the streets to demonstrate, not just for Ahed, because Ahed was arrested after a series of demonstrations that people took in the village against Trump's declaration regarding Jerusalem. And these demonstrations continued after Ahed was also arrested and was both response for Ahed's arrest and the recent political events on the ground. And every time I have been there, and I haven't been there every Friday when demonstrations usually happen, but every time I have been there, these demonstrations have been really scary. We have been like tear gassed, the point where many of us could not breathe anymore and nearly suffocated. I saw an old man with us who was demonstrating who just collapsed and he couldn't breathe or walk anymore, and he was at the risk of dying after the Israeli soldiers stormed us with tens of tear gas canisters at a time, just because we were walking down the street carrying flags and saying chants for the freedom of Palestine, Jerusalem, and Ahed. But this is a tiny bit of what the village of Nabi Saleh witnesses, because this to them in Nabi Saleh, this is not an event that happens only on Fridays when demonstrations happen. These kind of events happen almost every day. Soldiers storm the village, shoot people, throw tear gas canisters, break into homes, arrest people. And just a couple of days ago, both settlers and soldiers went into the village under the cover of the night, and they wrote graffitis on the walls of the village calling for the death of Ahed and all the Tamimis. So to people in Nabi Saleh, this kind of violence is not only bound to demonstration. They are subject to violence and emotional violence and psychological torture on a daily basis. There is a gate at the entrance of the village that the Israeli military controls, and whenever they want to lock everyone down in the village and they cannot leave, they just close that gate and no one can leave the village anymore. So people in Nabi Saleh are technically prisoners of the Israeli occupation and their neighboring settlement Halalish that they've been protesting for years now.
The Israeli government published last month a blacklist of 20 NGOs whose representatives are now banned from entering in Israel over their support for the BDS, boycott, disinvestment and sanctions movement. Explain what BDS is and the significance of this move from the Israeli government.
BDS is a Palestinian civil society-led movement that is calling for the boycott of Israeli products, divestment from all companies that are complicit in the Israeli occupation, and down the road hoping getting the international community to put sanctions on Israel to hold it accountable for violations of Palestinian rights until the three main Palestinian rights are achieved. And the three main Palestinian rights are equal citizenship for Palestinians inside Israel, removing the wall, and return of the refugees. And this movement has been launched was launched in 2005. And ever since, after launching the BDS call, so many allies and friends and people of conscience and freedom fighters and activists around the world picked the call and started supporting it by calling for boycotting Israeli products or divesting from companies that are complicit in Israeli occupation. The movement has witnessed a huge expansion in the last 12 years since it was launched, to the degree that Israel started to see it as an existential threat to Zionism and its Zionist project. Now, the recent list that was published is not a new move or the first move. In fact, what happened is that the Israeli lobby all over the world managed to pressure a few countries to pass laws that legalize BDS. And this is an indicator of how threatened they feel from this people-powered movement that is absolutely led by Palestinians here and activists around the world who are calling for justice. And this last move that they have done, publishing the list of these organizations that support BDS, is nothing but one last desperate move to silence and threaten and terrorize people who support BDS, and telling them that, yes, you want to support BDS, you want to support Palestinian rights, but we are watching you. We know what you are doing, we know what you are up to, and we will not allow you into the country. And they're actually trying to make that legal by passing laws that basically persecute organizations that support BDS, and even persecute BDS activists personally by not allowing them into the country. So this last move, or this last list, is nothing but one more desperate move from the Israeli government trying to suffocate the BDS movement or terrorize people who are trying to work on it and be part of this freedom movement that Palestinians started.
Asad Rehman, executive director of Forum Once, one of the NGOs blacklisted, wrote in The Guardian that the BDS blacklist is straight out of apartheid. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I mean, definitely. This is the thing. This kind of blacklist is just an extension of the Israeli apartheid out of Palestine or out of the territories that they can geographically control. And that's the thing. The reason why the Israeli government is really worried or mad about the BDS movement is that for the first time there is a Palestine strong movement that is out of geographical Palestine and out of the territories that they can geographically control under military law, and they can't crush people and imprison them and take them to jail whenever they want. But still, these kind of reactions, these kind of lists, these kind of laws that they are trying to pass is nothing but an extension of the internal apartheid system that they are implementing on the ground. They are just trying to take it to the next level globally in many different ways.
Este foi mais um episódio do É Apenas Fumaça, onde se fala sobre a sociedade com quem quer falar sobre ela. Thank you so much, Falastine. O É Apenas Fumaça é produzido por Bernardo Afonso, Frederico Raposo, Maria Almeida, Pedro Zuzarte, Pedro Santos, Sofia Rocha, Tomás Pereira e por mim, Ricardo Ribeiro. A música é dos Lotus Fever. Ouçam mais episódios em apenasfumaca.pt ou no iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, Comunidade Cultura e Arte, RUM, Rádio Universitária do Minho e também noutras aplicações de podcasts. Até já!